Buescher, yes.
Hello, everyone. This is Jim Williams. Myself, Katrina Thompson, and Latrice Hill are going to be presenting today. I want to say right up front that none of this information is to be shared until after the press release is issued from the agency. Just want to make right up front, make sure you know, don't share this information until you get the press release from the agency. Okay, so the purpose of this is to talk about SHIP and the policy so that you can answer questions from producers. First, I want to start with a SHIP overview. The SHIP pilot, or the Soil Health Improvement Program pilot, is a voluntary program that allows contracts with agricultural producers for 3, 4, or 5 years at their request. They get to decide that time frame. Recently expired CRP acres are not eligible for this program, and the participants must plant the lowest practicable cost perennial conserving use cover crop. And the Farm Bill authorizes 50,000 acres of SHIP in 5 states: Iowa, Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Again, the annual payments we made at 50% of the 3 predominant soils on the offer, and they'll be at 75% of the 3 predominant soils on an offer for a beginning, limited resource, socially disadvantaged, not including gender, or veteran farmers or ranchers. These rental rates are calculated without any reduction for general or continuous sign-up. So these are going to be the straight soil rental rates without any adjustment prior to the calculation. Cost share is only available to beginning, limited resource, socially disadvantaged, not including gender, or veteran farmers and ranchers for practice establishment. And the land may be hayed outside the primary nesting season with no payment reduction, provided it follows the plan and provides the stubble height requirement included in the plan. Today, we're going to be training on the policy for SHIP, the procedure for SHIP, the offer processing and how we're going to get to contract approval, required practice information for the conservation plan and for establishing these covers, and the conservation plan and signature deadlines. What we are not going to be covering today, but will be done in the next several, well, before sign up, is the automation training for this. We will get that announced and out to you as soon as we have it ready. SHIP sign-up has been targeted to start March 30th. Again, that date will be the date that we're going to use. It's going to be in the press release. Our target's March 30th, but until the press release goes out, this is not to be shared. Sign-up is again targeted to end August 21st, 2020. Contracts may be 3, 4, or 5 years. And again, that's at the producer's decision. The effective date for all of these contracts, regardless of the year, is going to be October 1 of this year. We also are going to send out from the national office some postcards to all producers within your state that have that may be eligible. Again, the postcard starts out by saying our records indicate you may be eligible. So we are planning to send those postcards out in the near term. So if you start seeing producers show up, that's probably going to be the reason. We're sending out a lot of them, so you're going to get questions. Okay, the sign-up is going to be sign-up 400 for SHIP. In the offer process, we're going to be accepting offers on a non-competitive, first-come, first-served basis. These offers are going to be placed into a batch process similar to what we did for continuous a couple of years ago, so that we do not exceed the 50,000 acre limit in the SHIP program. These will be, you'll be able to prove to be, once you're notified from the national office that an offer is acceptable, you're going to be able to move that to submitted for plan, and then once you get that, then you can send it to NRCS. Do not send any offers to NRCS until you've been notified by the national office that the offer has been submitted. Again, sign up 400 is going to have a 50,000 acre limit, and it's in the states in the prairie pothole region that I've mentioned previously. The land, these are the requirements for SHIP. The land must be physically located in a SHIP county. Cropland determined to be less productive as compared to other cropland on the farm, and this will be done with the GIS tool. No more than 15% of the eligible land per farm may be enrolled. That's in the law. Annually planted or considered planted to an agricultural commodity in each of the years 2017, 2018, and 2019. For SHIP, we also have considered planted. Acreage approved for prevented planting claim is going to be eligible. Alfalfa or other multi-year grasses or legumes if planted in 2017, 2018, or 2019. And we will include summer fallow if it's part of a regularly identified summer fallow rotation. And then one caveat to all of this is land enrolled in CRP during 2017, 2018, or 2019 is not eligible to be enrolled in SHIP. So if it's been in CRP, is now or has been in those 3 years, it would be ineligible for the SHIP program. And I should probably break right now just for a moment. We're going to be taking the questions over the chat feature in this. We're going to try to get to those questions at the end because I'm sure there's some. If we do not get them all covered, we're going to cover the rest of them and post them where we post the training slide Q&As, or the sign-up Q&As that we've been putting out, and that should all be put out tomorrow, hopefully. So we're going to post this whole training that we're providing, plus the questions and answers, hopefully to the SharePoint site tomorrow. So I just wanted to make sure if you have questions, put them in here so that we can work on getting any questions answered. For SHIP, the eligible practice is going to be called CP90, Soil Health Perennial Conservation Cover. This is the practice that the producers must establish, and this cover has to be established at the lowest practical cost based on seed mixes developed by NRCS. The state conservationists provided these mixes to the national office a couple of weeks ago. It is to be a perennial conserving use cover, and it needs to promote soil health. The question the producers are going to ask, what can I do with this land? The first thing they can do is hay or graze once the practice is established. Once this cover is established, they can hay and graze outside the primary nesting season, subject to the appropriate stubble height that's in the plan they get from NRCS. And this is without any reduction. The law also and the policy also allows that the land is available for walk-in access programs if your state has such a program. Producers are also going to be able to harvest seed if they're willing to take a 25% reduction in the annual rental payment and forego any type of insurance or reinsured under the Federal Crop Insurance Act. How FSA is going to determine less productive land? FSA will use the NRCS National Commodity Crop Productivity Index by soil to determine the least productive soils on a farm. Users will select a farm from the Common Land Unit. This is going to be in a GIS tool that Dan James has developed, and I've seen it. The eligibility area will be presented on the screen so that you'll be able to provide a map or show the producer on the screen the eligible acres within that farm. Now, if you have multiple tracts, you're going to have to, the software is supposed to keep track of how many acres you have total on the 2 tracts for the offer. From that point, once you identify the acres in GIS, you can then import that into Terra and begin to process this like any other CRP offer. The next slide shows you an example of the less productive land. The orange and the yellow is the lower tube, and this is not a center pivot, so don't get that. It's just a round field. It's easier to put in here. The The yellow and the orange is your 2/3 least productive soil on this farm. You could put 15% of this into SHIP, and it can be anywhere within that yellow and an orange segment. Now, if you have tracts in here, again, you're limited to 15% of the eligible cropland on the farm. So you could put 3 acres on one and 7 acres on the other if you wanted to. Soil rental rates, we're going to use the 2020 soil rental rates that are already out in the field. The rental rates, it's going to be based on the soil rental rates for the 3 predominant soils on the land offered. And the annual rental rate will be 50% of that soil rental rate of the 3 predominant soils, unless the annual rental rate will be 75% for limited resource, socially disadvantaged, beginning or veteran farmers and ranchers. Here's an example. Thank you. The example that we have on slide 16, the 3 predominant soils on this offer average $100 per acre. Normally that rental rate would be $50 per acre, but if that producer is a beginning farmer and rancher, socially disadvantaged, that producer would get $75 per acre. Again, we're having a new practice for SHIP. It's going to be CP90, the Soil Health Perennial Conservation Cover. Cost share for cover establishment is only available for beginning, limited resource, socially disadvantaged, or veteran farmers and ranchers. The seed cost must not exceed 50% of the actual seed cost. Must be a separate component on the program provisioning, and we are going to want to see seed component name start with CRP seed. In program provisioning for CP90, component 1 should be that CRP seed component. Component 2 would be your seedbed preparation, mineral seeding costs, herbicides, whatever needs to get that cover crop established on those acres. For practice, we need to have a practice certification to see that they got their cover crop established. So the county office must complete an FSA 848A and 848B for all practice establishment. Participants ineligible for cost share still must complete this 0 certification so that we can get, the NRCS will then certify that all practice installation and establishment has been completed. An important slide, CP90 incentives, SHIP practices. SHIP practice is not eligible for CRP incentives, including PIPs, SIPs, and annual rental incentives. Now we're going to start on the offer process. The first thing that will happen is the national office will announce CRP SHIP sign-up period. Again, you need to wait until you get the press release or the notice from the national office before we talk about the SHIP after you get this training. Step 2, the producer may come, he's going to get these postcards fairly soon. He's going to want to come in and talk to you about SHIP, and he may want to look at the difference between SHIP and general sign-up or continuous sign-up or even grasslands. So the county office will explain the details to the producer. They'll provide the SHIP fact sheet that should be coming out shortly, the CRP1 appendix, which should be out there already, and then there's a CRP1S addendum, and that has specific requirements to a SHIP contract because it's the only contract we have that's less than 10 years. So there's some different requirements caused by that, and that's in this CRP1S addendum. Step 3, the producer will request to submit an offer for enrollment in CRP SHIP. The county office determines eligibility, such as the producer eligibility, land eligibility. We're going to have to look at the cropping history like we would for CRP, except for the 3 years in question. CRP county cropland limit has not been exceeded. If you're over the 25% cropland limit, you can take the offer, but then you're going to need to send them a CRP 26 letter that's going to tell them that they're ineligible because they're over the county cropland limit. Step 5, if the producer meets the eligibility, if the eligibility is met, we're going to determine the less productive soil using the GIS tool, and instructions and training on that will be provided in the near future. Step 6 is we'll take the information out of the GIS tool and then create a Terra scenario, which will be uploaded into Coles, and then we'll enter any additional information needed into Coles. Once we've got all that information recorded, we'll complete and print the CRP-1S and the CRP-2S and notify the producer that the forms are ready for signature. If he's there, he may or she may sign it right then. So step 9, the producer signs the CRP-1S or the 2S. The county office ensures that the offer is in a submitted status. I cannot emphasize how important that is, that once the producer signs it, you need to get that status into Coles because we're going to be using that for approval. Step 11 is the national office will notify the state office of the offers in the batch that may be submitted to NRCS for planning. We're going to be monitoring the submitted offers, and we're going to be doing this selection, this batching, toward the middle of the month. County offices must ensure that as soon as the CRP-1S and 2 is signed, the date participant delivers offer is recorded into Coles. This is what tells us it's submitted. So make sure that date is in the software in Coles. Once you're notified that you have an acceptable offer, you'll probably get this notification either from the national office or the state office. To notify producers of acceptability of the offer using the CRP-23, update the offer status in Coles to submit it for plan, and then we need to provide the following to NRCS so they can begin plan development. They need the CRP-23, the signed CRP-1S and 2S, and then a geospatial map or data created in Terra designating the area being offered. Step 13 is, like we would for any CRP, we need to complete a measurement service, and then NRCS will complete a site visit as part of the conservation plan development. Step 15, NRCS provides a signed CRP plan, conservation plan, and NRCS CPA 52. Then it's back to the county office to make sure that we get the necessary consultations done, that we obtain any necessary permits, and we complete the FSA portion of the NRCS CPA 52. Then we have to review the plan, make sure it has everything it needs in it, make sure it has all the deadlines needed, make sure it has stubble heights in there if they're going to hay or graze. And then once we have all the signatures in there, then we can upload this into Coles to submit it to COC for approval. Again, the national office is going to be watching the Coles status on these to see where we're at fairly regularly. Step 17 is the county committee or CED can sign the conservation plan. The county office ensures the correct AGI certification is filed. And then if that is the case, CED or the county committee can approve the CRP-1S. County office enters that approval date into start date for the CRP-1S into Coles, and then we're going to record that CRP-1S contract number from CCMS on the CRP-1S. And then we're going to notify the producer that they are the happy owner of a SHIP contract. And we're also going to provide them a copy of the CRP-1S. Now I'm going to turn it over. Well, first, I got ahead of myself. The county office must provide signed CRP-1, 2C, and digital imagery to NRCS by COB August 21. You can only give them those documents if that offer has been deemed acceptable by the national office. So on that last day in August, there may be a delay, and we're going to try to minimize that as much as possible, but that's the deadline for getting this information to NRCS so that they have time to get these plans done that we need done by early September. FSA will record the status in Coles as submitted to plan as soon as anything is submitted to NRCS for planning. And then NRCS must complete the conservation plan and return it to FSA by close of business September 11th. Those are our target dates right now. Those are the same dates that we use for the regular, all of our other CRP planning. Now, Katrina is going to talk to you a little bit about conservation planning.
All right, thanks, Jim. For the conservation plan, we prepped a little bit ahead of time, and as Jim stated earlier, state conservationists were asked to come up with some feeding recommendations with the State Technical Committee to make this program work. And so some of that information is already out there to build upon for each state. If you have not seen that, you can ask me for it and I'll send it to you. The feeding recommendations can include introduced, native, grasses, legumes, and forbs. The practice implementation guidance should be provided to the producer on one of the following methods: utilizing our job sheets, and I will give you a list of the accepted NRCS practice codes here in a moment, and some of those have job sheets, so you would make sure that all of the recommendations are included on that and give that to the producer, or you might feel like it's necessary to create a SHIP CP90 job sheet. If you do that, please coordinate with FSA and make sure everybody understands what's on that unique job sheet. So this conservation planning isn't much different from any of the other normal CRP conservation planning. We're going to schedule the primary practice to establish the perennial cover. We do not schedule management practices because they are not needed for these contracts. The maintenance, of course, is required, and that will be covered in the NRCS practice operation and maintenance plan under our standards and specifications. One thing that's important is that, as we know, NRCS certifies the practice has been installed, and so that will happen within the first year, hopefully, and then we will need to go out and make sure it's established, because they will not be able to hay or graze until that establishment is deemed, or they can't harvest seed. So we need to make sure that we are giving FSA that information. So you will need to include haying and grazing or any seed harvest in the conservation plan if the producer plans on utilizing those three options. And as we've said a few times before, there is minimal stubble heights required that should be in that conservation plan. The conservation practices that are approved to be installing the soil health perennial conservation cover are our normal practices: 327, 512, if you need to do any nutrient management, pest management, access control, wildlife habitat management if necessary. This also, if they're going to hay or graze, you need to have those certain practices and the details included in the conservation plan. And Jim went over the dates on the conservation plan deadline for FSA to give the paperwork to NRCS, but that is just the drop deadline. So each month when they batch, they should be getting those over to us, and we're going to continually plan, and hopefully we won't have a big lump of those in August. If we keep the workflow process going, we can spread out that workload. And I think I'm handing it back over to Jim.
Thank you, Katrina. This next slide goes over some of the contract approval and effective dates. We must have these contracts approved by COB September 30th, 2020. The effective date on all of these contracts is going to be starting October 1, 2020. And we have to have the COC approval loaded in Coles by COB September 30th. SHIP contracts can be terminated. If a SHIP contract is voluntarily terminated by all the participants, the CRP contract may be terminated at any time before the end of the contract period, and the participants must refund to CCC all rental payments received from CCC. If we have a contract that's terminated due to noncompliance by the participant, liquidated damages must be paid. In addition to the refund of all annual payments received plus interest, the participant must pay an amount equal to 25% of the applicable rental rate per acres on the 1F times the number of acres terminated. This is similar to what we do for other types of CRP, except for the voluntary termination. Again, this is a CRP program. We're going to allow for the harvest of prior year crops is permitted after October 1 of this year without a payment reduction. And grazing will be prohibited beginning the later of 10 days after the COC or CED approval or October 1 of 2020. In the slide 35 goes over the deadlines. Again, August 21 is the deadline for producers to submit a signed offer, at least that's the target date that we have now. August 21 is the target date for us to deliver all those offers to NRCS so that they can begin the planning. Hopefully, we've done a better job during the year, and we've been able to give them some of these to work on every month so that we're not going to have a huge glut there. So, again, we'll do what we can to get those approved. September 11 is the deadline for NRCS or TSP to complete the conservation plan. Get the signed and obtain the signatures required on the plan. And again, September 30 is the deadline for the COC or CED to approve the CRP-1S for enrollment. And now I'm going to turn this over to Latrice Hill, and she's going to talk about some of our outreach activities.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning.
I heard her.
Latrice, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Latrice, can you hear me? Anybody else hear her? Okay, I don't believe that you can hear Latrice, so I have her speaker notes, so I'm going to go over them for you so that you know. Outreach Office has been working closely with the Conservation Division to ensure that producers across the 5 states have an equal access to the pilot. This is very important since it's a first-come, first-served sign-up basis. They hosted a call last week with their state coordinators to start this process. They plan to help state specialists and county office communicate how this program can help producers, that this is a first-come, first-served. That's very important. The state pest specialists will make sure the state specialists for outreach will be coordinating and working with others on these outreach activities. And the outreach office will be tracking these activities and reporting on them through the outreach tracking system. We want to make sure there is parity in outreach between the 5 states. We want to make sure we're getting the same consistent message out in the 5 states. And we want to make sure that you all get credit for good work that will be happening. What's coming is a public-facing slide deck, suggested outreach activities, instructions for loading activities into Otis, which I think is the tracking system. The next slide. The week after the SHIP announcement, the External Affairs will provide communication tools and outreach sharing to field operation outreach materials. Coordinators will begin coordinating with state specialists and county offices on outreach activities. And then 1 week after announcement, the postcard mailing should be begun, and the outreach office will meet with the outreach coordinators to coordinate their activities.
Jim, thank you. I am not sure what happened. Thanks so
Well,
much for covering that.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that's it. I think the key thing here is going to be to make sure that we are communicating, the SOCs working with the specialist, and making sure that we are in lockstep across the 5 states in our outreach efforts. You know, as Jim said, this is only 50,000 acres. It's first come, first served. So we want to make sure that producers in Iowa are hearing about it, just as producers in Montana are. We don't want it to be extra outreach in one state and then less outreach in another. So we've been talking with those 5 state outreach coordinators, and we're working with them to make sure that there is parity for all producers across the 5 states. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Latrice. Those were the slides that I had. Let's start to look at some of the questions. The first question I have is, does the acreage have to be physically capable of being cropped at the time the land is offered? Yes, it has to be cropland, and it has to have a planted crop on it or history of it that meets the qualifications. All counties in the 5 states are eligible for SHIP, so if the land is physically located in any of the 5 states, it's eligible for SHIP. The slides should be available for printing the day after the announcement. I'm going to have to get back to you on the one on the preventive planning. We'll try to get that answered this afternoon. Saline areas would be eligible if they meet the eligible land, if they're cropped, if they meet the cropping history requirements. I do not know of any reductions in the crop insurance premiums, so as far as I know, none. Maybe I misspoke when I talked. If a producer, after the cover is established, wants to harvest seed, that 25% reduction is in their annual rental payment. It has nothing to do with their federal crop insurance payment. And then if they take that seed off of there and pay that reduction, then they're going to be ineligible to insure that or reinsure that acreage that they harvest seed on. I think on the last question on what if the soils map or on an offer shows productive soil, high productivity index, but the area offered is saline and or wet and not as productive as the soil information shows. Who determines eligibility, producer or county office? County offices are going to determine the eligibility. I think that's all the questions we have.
Let me scroll down.
Whoop. It's a good question with the length of the SHIP sign-up and the current ARC PLC workload in county offices. Can the postcard mailing be delayed? We will look into that. I know we have a problem here because we want to make sure everybody's, because it's first come, first serve, we need to do whatever we can to get that information out. So we'll take that under consideration. Is there a minimum acreage for the offer? No, there's a maximum. It can't be more than 15% of the eligible acres. I have a question. Is the FSA 860 going to be used to determine the beginning farmer, socially disadvantaged, beginning farmer or rancher? Yes, we're going to be using the FSA 860. And again, we have the same requirements we have for all of CRP. It's going to exclude gender.
Jim, you might want to mention to them that it needs to be loaded in the eligibility database. This poll is going to read that.
Okay. So before it gets to Coles, it has to go through the GIS and get into Terra to get into Coles.
Yes.
And that's something we're going to cover more when we do the automation training. Yes, prevented planning, if it's filed and approved, will be considered for planning history. We had a question on slide 33 on how cost share payments apply to the terminations, and we'll get back to you on that one. We should have an answer for that tomorrow. It depends on how it's terminated, if it's voluntary or if it's not.
They can't see the question. Oh, they're asking to read them.
Okay.
Oh, there, I can't figure out how to do it.
Question is, did you say any county in any of the 5 states is eligible? Does this not mean it's the same area footprint of the Prairie Pothole CPA that we use for national sign-up? That is correct. Any county in the 5 states is eligible for this. Are there any circumstances that a producer would not be required to plant the acreage to meet the grass stand? We're going to work with NRCS on that. We'd have to look because I could see maybe a possibility if there's a certain crop rotation, but it would have to be a cover that meets the requirements. Do the standard rules for owner operatorship apply? And they do. Yes. Is the CED authority to approve CRP-1S automatic, or because this is a new program, is the COC required to delegate it to the CED? This is going to be included in the SHIP notices coming out shortly, and it should be like what we do for regular CRP. The land ownership requirements are going to be the same that we have for CRP. They have to own it for over a year, and the same landlord-tenant provisions would apply to this also. The seed that would be harvested is grass seed. We hope so, because we're planting grass on there. That's what we need established. Ooh, that's a good question. There's a really good question here. I understand that management does not have to be planned. well, actually, maintenance would be planned in the conservation plan, but can a state require management to be part of the plan to ensure that we improve soil health on these acres? And we're going to have to get back to you on that question. There are no liquidated damages during the offer process, and that's similar to what we do with the other programs again. So we're being consistent. The question is, how do we verify the participant will be eligible for the 75% rental rate? That's going to be based on the FSA 860. They're going to need to sign and certify to that and provide us a date when they became a beginning farmer and rancher. Just like other CRP, will SHIP have base acreage reductions if needed? And that is a yes. Does the acreage have to have been cropped in all 3 years, 2017, 18, and 19? It needs to be cropped, considered planted, or you could have prevented planting, or if you had a summer fallow situation where you have wheat, then summer fallow, then wheat, that would count toward eligibility of the land. Is there cost share for practice establishment? There's only cost share available if you're a beginning farmer, underrepresented, or beginning farmer and rancher. Then you would get cost share at the 50% rate. How are the soils determined to be the least productive soil? Is there a list, or is it simply the least productive on the farm? Right now, it's being done by GIS tool that's looking at the soil characteristics for using data provided from NRCS to determine the least productive land on that farm. I don't know what earlier information. There's a question here. Earlier information on SHIP program indicated there was a 2% increase in the crop insurance subsidy if the farm number would be available coming. I'm not sure what you're looking at. If you'd send that to me, I'd be willing to look at it, but we don't have any information to that effect. And do they get the 75% rate all the years of the contract, even if in a year 4 of the contract they are no longer a beginning farmer? And the answer is yes. That is the last question I show. Again, we're going to post all these Q&As, questions and answers, on the the CD SharePoint site. It's going to be the same location that we put the questions and answers for general and continuous sign up. The training slides and this presentation will be put where we put the training slides for the training in October that we did nationally. So if you have any other questions, send them to John Carter or myself, and then we will try to get those added as they come in. I don't have any other questions. And I guess one final reminder, this information is not to be shared until you get a press release announcing the program so that we know the actual start dates. I know the target is March 30th, but we won't know for sure until the press release goes out. This information was so that producers come in and ask questions. You'll have some information. Again, this is not to be shared until the press release, fact sheet, and notices come out. I want to thank you for your time, and we'll try to get this up for other people within your state as soon as possible. Thank you. Oh, 100 was good. I know.